The California sun beat down mercilessly on the Pacific Coast Highway as Marcus Chen guided his midnight blue Bugatti Chiron along the winding coastal road. The ocean stretched endlessly to his right, glittering like scattered diamonds under the afternoon light. At 42, Marcus had worked his entire life for moments like these. The smell of Italian leather, the purr of an 8-liter engine, the envious stares from other drivers. This car wasn't just a vehicle. It was a monument to every 18-hour workday, every missed family dinner, every sacrifice he'd made building his tech empire from a cramped studio apartment in Silicon Valley. His phone buzzed in the center console. Without looking, he knew it was probably Jennifer, his ex-wife, calling about their daughter Emma's upcoming birthday party. He'd promised to be there this time, really promised, but the quarterly investors' meeting had been moved to the same weekend. The guilt gnawed at him, but he pushed it aside. Emma would understand eventually. Kids always did, right? The engine's smooth hum suddenly stuttered. Marcus frowned, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. The car lurched once, twice, and then the dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree, warning lights flashing in angry reds and oranges. His heart sank as the Bugatti's powerful engine coughed and died, leaving him coasting in silence except for the sound of tires on asphalt. "No, no, 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 no," Marcus muttered, desperately turning the key. Nothing. The engine refused to even attempt to turn over. He managed to guide the dead vehicle onto the narrow shoulder, barely avoiding the traffic that whipped past him at 70 miles per hour. Marcus sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the wheel, staring at the lifeless dashboard. Of all the places for this to happen, he was somewhere between Malibu and Santa Monica, miles from the nearest Bugatti dealership. He pulled out his phone and searched for the closest authorized service center. The nearest one was in Beverly Hills, 30 miles away. He called their number. "Bugatti Beverly Hills, this is Trevor speaking. How may I provide you with an exceptional automotive experience today?" The voice was smooth, practiced, insufferably cheerful. "My Chiron just died on PCH," Marcus said bluntly. "I need a tow and service immediately." "Oh my, I'm terribly sorry to hear that, Mr. Chen, Marcus Chen. I'm a platinum client." "Of course, Mr. Chen. Let me pull up your file." There was a pause filled with keyboard clicking. "Ah yes, here we are. I see you purchased your Chiron just 8 months ago. Beautiful choice. Now regarding the tow, I'm afraid our flatbed is currently in Pasadena with another client. We could have someone to you in approximately 3 to 4 hours. 3 to 4 hours? Marcus felt his blood pressure spike. "I'm on the side of a highway in a $2 million car. I completely understand your frustration, sir. Unfortunately, with traffic patterns this time of day." Marcus hung up. He tried 2 other exotic car services, but both were either unavailable or quoted him similar wait times. The afternoon sun was getting lower, and he was already sweating in his Tom Ford suit. He loosened his tie and stepped out of the car, immediately feeling the heat radiating from the asphalt. A few cars slowed down as they passed, drivers rubbernecking at the expensive machine, sitting crippled on the shoulder. Marcus felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't experienced in years. When you had money, problems were supposed to disappear. You threw cash at them, and they evaporated. But here he was, helpless beside a machine that cost more than most people's houses. A faded blue pickup truck slowed and pulled onto the shoulder about 50 feet behind him. Marcus watched warily as the driver's door opened. What emerged was not what he expected. She was maybe 5'6", with sun-streaked brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore oil-stained jeans, work boots, and a grey tank top that revealed toned, tanned arms marked with a few small scars, the kind you get from working with your hands. She looked to be in her mid-30s, with sharp green eyes that were currently scanning his disabled Bugatti with the kind of professional assessment usually reserved for surgeons examining a patient. "Nice car," she said, walking up with an easy confidence that immediately put Marcus on edge. There was no awe in her. voice. No reverence, just a simple statement of fact. "Thanks," Marcus replied curtly, his instinct being to dismiss her. He'd dealt with enough gawkers and hangers-on in his life to have developed a thick shell. "Engine trouble?" she asked, moving closer. She was now standing just a few feet from the Bugatti's front end, head tilted slightly as if she could diagnose it by sight alone. "Obviously," Marcus said, his tone sharper than he intended. The heat, the frustration, the sheer inconvenience of it all was making him irritable. She didn't flinch at his rudeness. Instead, she crouched down, peering under the front of the car. "W16 engine, right? Quad-turbo setup?" Marcus blinked. That wasn't the kind of knowledge he'd expected from someone driving a beat-up pickup truck. "Yeah, look, I appreciate you stopping, but I've already called for professional service. They'll be here in a few hours." She stood up, wiping her hands on her jeans, despite not having touched anything yet. "A few hours in this heat? That car's going to be cooking. If it's an electrical issue, which I'm guessing it might be given how she died on you, the longer she sits in this sun, the worse it could get. And you know this because—" Marcus couldn't keep the skepticism out of his voice. "Because I'm a mechanic," she said simply. "Rory Castellano. I run a shop in Santa Monica." She extended her hand. Marcus looked at her hand for a moment before shaking it. Her grip was firm, her palm calloused. "Marcus Chen." "I know," Rory said with a slight smile. "I recognize you from TechCrunch. Read about your company's IPO last year. Impressive." Marcus felt a small surge of pride despite himself. "You follow tech news. I follow a lot of things, including cars that shouldn't be broken down on the side of the road." She nodded toward the Bugatti. "Mind if I take a look?" "No charge, just curious. Plus, I've always wanted to see under the hood of one of these things." Everything in Marcus's upbringing, his business instincts, his careful life told him to say no. This woman, despite her apparent knowledge, was a stranger with a pickup truck, not a certified Bugatti technician. But something in her demeanor, the complete lack of pretense, the genuine interest in the machine rather than its price tag, made him hesitate. "You've worked on high-end cars before?" he asked. "Define high-end," Rory replied. "I've rebuilt Ferraris, Lamborghinis, a few Porsches, never a Bugatti, I'll admit. But an engine's an engine, and electrical systems are pretty universal once you understand the logic." Marcus found himself nodding slowly. "Fine. Take a look. But don't touch anything without asking me first." "Deal." Rory walked back to her truck and returned with a worn leather tool bag that looked like it had seen decades of use. She set it down carefully beside the Bugatti and looked at Marcus expectantly. "Hood release?" He leaned into the car and pulled the release. The hood opened with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the impossibly complex machinery beneath. Even Marcus, who knew nothing about cars beyond how to drive them, could appreciate the engineering marvel before them. It looked more like a piece of modern art than an engine. All carbon fiber, polished metal, and precisely routed hoses. Rory leaned in, her eyes moving systematically across the engine bay. She didn't touch anything yet, just observed. Marcus found himself watching her instead of the engine, noting the way her brow furrowed in concentration, how she unconsciously bit her lower lip while thinking. "Can you try starting her again?" Rory asked without looking up. Marcus got back in the driver's seat and turned the key. Nothing, not even a click, just dead silence and those angry dashboard lights. Rory straightened up, thinking, electrical, definitely electrical. The question is where? She pulled out her phone and started typing something. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked. "Looking at the wiring diagram. I might not have worked on a Chiron before, but I'm pretty sure I can find the schematics online." Her fingers flew across the screen. "Here we go. Okay, so the main ECU is right about there." She pointed to a specific area of the engine bay. Marcus watched as she traced imaginary lines through the air, following wiring paths only she could see. It was like watching a chess master plan move several turns ahead. "I need to check something," Rory said. finally reaching into her tool bag. She pulled out a digital multimeter. "This won't hurt anything, just measuring voltage. That okay?" Marcus nodded, feeling increasingly out of his depth, but also strangely fascinated. Rory attached the multimeter's leads to various points in the electrical system, calling out numbers that meant nothing to Marcus, but clearly meant something to her. After about 5 minutes of testing, she stood back with a satisfied nod. "Found it," she said. "Your ground connection to the ECU is shot. Probably corrosion on the terminal. It's a known issue with some European cars in coastal areas. The salt air gets in there and eats away at the connection. Without a proper ground, the computer can't function, and without the computer, this very expensive engine is just a very expensive paperweight. So, it's fixable?" Marcus asked, hope creeping into his voice. "Oh yeah, definitely fixable. The question is whether you want to wait for your dealership guys or if you want me to jury rig. Something to at least get you mobile enough to drive to their shop." Marcus looked at his watch. It was already after 4. If he waited for the tow, he wouldn't get home until well past dark, and he had a conference call with Tokyo investors at 8 p.m. What would jury rigging involve? Rory smiled, and Marcus noticed for the first time that it was a genuinely warm smile, not the calculated expressions he was used to in his business dealings. "I'd clean the existing connection as best I can. Maybe bypass it with a temporary ground wire and get you running. It won't be a permanent fix. You'll still need to take it to the dealership, but it'll get you home safe." "How long would that take?" "Give me 20 minutes. Marcus almost laughed. The sheer confidence of it. This woman in her stained jeans and beat-up truck promising to fix in 20 minutes what the certified technicians couldn't even reach in 3 hours. But something in her eyes stopped him from dismissing her outright. "If you break something," he started, "then you'd be no worse off than you are now," Rory finished. "Look, Mr. Chen, I get it. This car probably costs more than I'll make in 10 years. You don't know me from Adam, but I'm offering to help, and I know what I'm doing. Your call." Marcus stood there for a long moment, the sound of traffic rushing past them, the ocean waves crashing in the distance. Every instinct told him to wait for the professionals, but there was something about Rory, her straightforward manner, her obvious competence, the way she looked at his car like it was a puzzle to be solved rather than a status symbol to be admired. 20 minutes, he said finally, "but I'm watching every move." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Rory replied, already pulling tools from her bag. She dove into the engine bay with the focus of a surgeon. Marcus watched as she carefully removed panels, exposing the ECU and its wiring. True to her word, she explained everything she was doing as she worked. "See this connector here? Look at that green corrosion. That's your problem right there." She pulled out a small wire brush and began carefully cleaning the terminal. "The electrons can't flow properly through all that oxidation. It's like trying to push water through a clogged pipe." Marcus found himself genuinely interested despite his initial skepticism. "How do you even know all this?" Rory didn't look up from her work. "My dad owned a garage in Detroit. I grew up there. Started helping him when I was 8. Turned wrenches before I could ride a bike without training wheels." She smiled at the memory. "He always said that a good mechanic doesn't just fix cars, they understand them. Every system, every connection, why the engineers designed it that way." "Is that why you moved to California, to open your own shop?" There was a brief pause before Rory answered. "Something like that. Sometimes you need a fresh start, you know. New place, new opportunities." She didn't elaborate, and Marcus didn't push. 15 minutes in, Rory was running a temporary ground wire from the ECU to a more solid connection point. Her hands moved with practiced precision, every movement economical and purposeful. Marcus noticed that despite the complexity of what she was doing, she never seemed rushed or uncertain. "Try it now," Rory said, stepping back from the engine bay. Marcus slid back into the driver's seat, his heart rate unconsciously elevated. He turned the key, Expecting nothing, the engine roared to life. It wasn't a gradual start. The Bugatti woke up with its characteristic aggressive purr, all 1,500 horses suddenly ready to run. The dashboard lights went green, systems came online, and the whole car seemed to exhale in relief. Marcus sat there, stunned. He could feel the power thrumming through the steering wheel, the slight vibration of the engine at idle. His $2 million car, which had been completely dead 20 minutes ago, was now running perfectly. He got out of the car and found Rory carefully closing the hood. She had a slight smirk on her face, the expression of someone who knew exactly how impressive what she'd just done was, but was too modest to say it outright. I don't know what to say, Marcus admitted. Thank you usually works, Rory replied, wiping her hands on a rag from her tool bag. Thank you. Really, Marcus caught himself about to make excuses for doubting her. I shouldn't have assumed you couldn't do it. Rory shrugged. People see the truck, the jeans, a woman with tools. They assume. I'm used to it. The car starting is all the vindication I need. Marcus pulled out his wallet. What do I owe you? Nothing. Come on, you just saved me hours of waiting and probably $1,000 tow fee. Let me pay you. Rory shook her head. I stopped because I wanted to help and because I don't like seeing beautiful machines broken down. Call it professional courtesy. Or karma, take your pick. At least let me buy you dinner, Marcus heard himself say, surprising himself. There's a great place in Santa Monica, right on the beach. It's the least I can do. Rory looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus suddenly felt very aware of how different they were. Him in his designer suit, her in her work clothes, him driving a car that cost more than most houses, her driving a truck that had probably seen better decades. Rain check, Rory said finally. I've got to get back to my shop. I've got a '67 Mustang waiting for a new transmission. But here. She pulled out a business card from her back pocket. It was simple, just her name, Castellano Automotive, and a phone number. If you want someone to do the proper fix on that ground connection, give me a call. I can do it for a fraction of what the dealership will charge. Marcus took the card, noting the oil stain in one corner. I might take you up on that. Also, Rory added, you should really take that. Car in for a full inspection. If there's corrosion on one ground, there might be more developing elsewhere. These coastal cars need more attention than people think. I will. Thank you again, Rory. Anytime, Mr. Chen. She headed back to her truck, throwing her tool bag in the bed. Marcus, he called out. Call me Marcus. She smiled. Drive safe, Marcus, and get that ground fixed properly soon. My patch job will hold, but it's not a permanent solution. Marcus watched as she climbed into her truck and pulled back onto the highway, disappearing into the flow of traffic. He stood there for a moment, looking at the business card in his hand, then at his now running Bugatti. For the first time in years, Marcus Chen realized he'd been genuinely surprised by someone. Not by their wealth or connections or what they could do for his business, but by their competence, their character, their willingness to help without expecting anything in return. He got back in his car, the leather seat, conforming to him like a familiar embrace. As he pulled back onto PCH, the Bugatti responding perfectly to every input, Marcus found his mind returning not to the car or his close call, but to the woman in the beat-up pickup truck who'd fixed his impossible problem in 20 minutes. He glanced at the business card sitting in his cup holder, and something told him this wouldn't be the last time they crossed paths. The sun was beginning to set over the Pacific as Marcus drove home, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. For once, he wasn't thinking about quarterly earnings or investor meetings or the next big acquisition. He was thinking about how sometimes the most valuable things in life come from the most unexpected places. 3 days later, Marcus found himself driving down a somewhat run-down street in Santa Monica, his Bugatti looking absurdly out of place among the modest homes and small businesses. He'd told himself he was only taking Rory up on her offer to properly fix the ground connection, that it made financial sense to save money on the repair. But as he pulled up to Castellano Automotive, housed in a converted warehouse with peeling paint and a faded sign, he had to admit there was more to it than just saving a few $100s. The curiosity had been eating at him. How did someone with Rory's obvious skills end up running what appeared to be a struggling independent shop? Why was she out on PCH that day? And why couldn't he stop thinking about the way she'd looked at his car, not with envy or desire, but with the pure appreciation of someone who understood the engineering behind the beauty? He parked in front of the large bay door and got out. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic, and from inside the garage, the unmistakable sound of someone working, the clang of metal on metal, the whir of an air compressor, classic rock playing on a radio. Marcus walked through the open bay door and stopped, taking in the scene. The shop was clean, despite being obviously old. Tools hung in organized rows on pegboards. 2 lifts dominated the space, one holding a classic Ford Mustang, probably the '67 she'd mentioned, and the other empty. In the corner, a small office with glass windows overlooked the work area, and there, underneath the Mustang, was Rory, her legs sticking out from beneath the car, work light illuminating her from below. "Be right with you," she called out, apparently having heard him enter. "Just finishing up this crossmember." Marcus walked closer, noting the meticulous organization of her workspace. Every tool had its place. Parts were labeled and stored carefully. It reminded him of the clean efficiency he demanded in his own offices, but here it felt more personal, more earned. A few minutes later, Rory slid out from under the Mustang on a creeper board. She was wearing the same work clothes as before, though these were covered in fresh grease stains. When she saw him, surprise flashed across her face before settling into a pleased smile. "Marcus Chen," she said, standing up and brushing off her jeans in a futile attempt to look more presentable. "Didn't expect to see you here." "You gave me your card," Marcus reminded her. "Said I should get that ground connection properly fixed." "I did say that," Rory agreed. "But I figured a guy with a Bugatti would stick with the dealership." "I figured a guy with a Bugatti should support local businesses," Marcus replied, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Rory's smile widened. "Well, I appreciate that. Let me wash up and we can take a look." She walked over to a large industrial sink in the corner and scrubbed her hands thoroughly. "How's she been running since the other day?" "Perfectly. Your patch held up great." "Good. Though I imagine you've been worried every time you turn the key." Marcus laughed. "You're not wrong. I may have held my breath a few times." Rory dried her hands and grabbed a clipboard from her workbench. "All right, let's get her up on the lift and see what we're working with. Did you bring it to the dealership to get checked out like I suggested?" "I made an appointment, but it's not for another 2 weeks. They're backed up." Rory shook her head. "That's the problem with exotic dealers. Great for regular maintenance if you can wait. Terrible for anything urgent. Pull her into the empty bay over there." Marcus carefully maneuvered the Bugatti into position. As he got out, Rory was already lowering the lift's arms, positioning them precisely under the car's reinforced lift points. She moved around the vehicle with practiced care, double-checking each position before beginning to raise the car. "Most people would just slide the arms under and hope for the best," Marcus observed. "Most people don't care about a car the way they should," Rory replied, raising the Bugatti until it was at chest height. "Your car trusts you to take care of it. Least you can do is return that trust." She grabbed a work light and started her inspection, beginning at the front where she'd made her temporary repair. Marcus found himself watching her work rather than the car. There was something almost meditative about her movements, the way she traced wiring with her fingers, how she tested connections with gentle pressure, the slight nods she gave when something met her approval, or the small frowns when something didn't. "You really love this, don't you?" he asked. "Working on cars." Rory glanced at him, still mostly focused on the engine bay above her. "Is it that obvious?" "I recognize it. I get the same way about coding, about solving complex problems. That total absorption. Then you understand, Rory said, moving to check another section. When I'm working on a car, nothing else matters. Not bills, not stress, not past mistakes. It's just me and the machine, figuring each other out. She paused, then added, that probably sounds crazy to someone who sees cars as just transportation. I don't, actually. At least I didn't used to. Marcus leaned against a workbench, careful not to disturb any tools. When I was a kid, my dad had this old Honda Civic. Nothing special, but he loved that car. Washed it every Sunday, kept the maintenance logs in a binder. He'd let me sit in the driver's seat and pretend to drive while he checked the oil. What happened to it? Rory asked. He had to sell it when money got tight. I was 12. I remember him crying that night, thinking I was asleep. It wasn't just a car to him. It was the one thing he had that was his, you know. Not for work, not for the family. Just his. Rory had stopped working and was looking at him with new understanding. And now, you have a Bugatti. And now I have a Bugatti, Marcus echoed, hearing the complexity in those words for the first time. Which I barely drive because I'm always working. My ex-wife used to joke that I spent more on car insurance than I did driving the thing. Ex-wife? Rory asked, then immediately looked apologetic. Sorry, none of my business. It's fine. Jennifer. We divorced 2 years ago. She got tired of being married to someone who was always at the office. Marcus found himself sharing more than he'd intended. We have a daughter, Emma. She's turning 14 next month. Tough age, Rory commented, returning to her inspection but clearly still listening. Yeah, and I'm missing her party. Again. Investors' meeting got moved to the same weekend. The guilt that had been gnawing at him since making that decision rose up fresh. Rory was quiet for a moment, then said, Can I tell you something, Marcus? And you can tell me to shut up if I'm overstepping. Go ahead. In my experience, the things we think we can't change are usually the things we're most afraid to change. Meetings can be moved. Investors can wait. Daughters only turn 14 once. The words hit harder than Marcus expected. It's not that simple. It never is. Rory agreed. But nothing ever is. She pulled out a wire and showed it to him. See this? This is your main problem. The corrosion goes deeper than I thought. You've probably got similar issues at other ground points throughout the electrical system. If we don't fix them, you're going to have more breakdowns. How long to fix it properly? If I do a full electrical audit and clean all the connections, we're looking at a full day, maybe a day and a half. I'd need to order some parts too. Probably 3 days total before you can have her back. Marcus winced. 3 days without his car felt impossible, even though he rarely drove it. What's the alternative? Keep patch-fixing problems as they come up until something fails catastrophically. Maybe you get lucky and nothing major goes wrong. Maybe you don't, and that failure happens at 80 miles per hour on the freeway. Rory's tone was matter-of-fact, not judgmental. Your call, but I'm going to be honest with you. This car needs real work. Marcus thought about his schedule. He had meetings, calls, obligations piled on obligations, but Rory was right. Better to deal with it now than risk a real disaster later. Do it. The full audit and repairs. Good choice. Rory made notes on her clipboard. I'll get started on the assessment now and order parts this afternoon. You need a ride somewhere? I'll call an Uber. Or, Rory said, wiping her hands again, I could drive you. I need to pick up some parts from a supplier in Culver City anyway. Where are you headed? Marcus almost declined automatically. Mixing business with personal had never been his style, but something made him pause. Santa Monica. My office is near the pier. On my way. Let me grab my keys. 10 minutes later, Marcus found himself in the passenger seat of Rory's pickup truck, a vehicle that couldn't have been more different from his Bugatti. The interior was worn but clean, smelling faintly of oil and coffee. A collection of CDs sat in the center console. Classic rock, some jazz, a surprising amount of classical music. Beethoven? Marcus asked, holding up a CD. Rory glanced over, a bit embarrassed. What can I say? I have eclectic taste. Sometimes when I'm working on a particularly complex problem, classical music helps me think. I do the same thing, Chopin usually. A man of culture, Rory teased, pulling into traffic. The truck handled sluggishly compared to the Bugatti, but she drove with confident ease. They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Rory spoke again. "Can I ask you something? What made you start your company?" Marcus considered the question. Most people asked how he'd become successful, not why he'd started. "I was 24, working at a big tech firm, watching upper management make decisions that I knew were wrong. Inefficient systems, bloated processes, brilliant people being held back by bureaucracy. I got frustrated enough that I decided to build something better." "Did you build something better?" "I think so. More efficient, definitely. More profitable, absolutely. But sometimes I wonder if I just traded one set of problems for another." Rory navigated through a congested intersection with practiced ease. "What do you mean?" "When I started TechCore, it was about innovation, about solving real problems. Now, half my time is spent in meetings about meetings, managing investors' expectations, dealing with corporate politics. The actual technology, the thing I loved, that's somebody else's job now." "So why not change it?" Rory asked, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "Because I have investors, stakeholders, employees depending on me. You can't just walk away from that." "I didn't say walk away. I said change it." Rory glanced at him. "You built it once. You could build it again, differently." Marcus found himself without a good response. When had he stopped believing he could change things? When had he accepted that this was just how it had to be? They pulled up to a parts supplier, a nondescript building in an industrial area. "Give me 5 minutes," Rory said, hopping out. Marcus watched through the windshield as she entered the shop and was immediately greeted warmly by an older man behind the counter. They talked animatedly, Rory pulling out her phone to show him something, probably photos of his car. The man's eyes went wide, and even from the truck, Marcus could see his excitement. When Rory returned, she was carrying a small box. "Got the connectors I need for your car. Jose says he's never worked on a Bugatti, but he'd love to see it when you pick it up." "Jose?" "The guy who runs this place. 40 years in the business. If he doesn't have a part, it probably doesn't exist. He's also my parts teacher. Taught me how to source hard-to-find components when I first moved out here." As they continued to Marcus's office, he found himself asking, "Why did you move to LA? You mentioned Detroit earlier." Rory's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Fresh start, like I said. My dad died 4 years ago, cancer. After that, staying in Detroit felt like living in a museum of memories. Everything reminded me of him, of the shop we'd built together. I needed something new. I'm sorry about your father." "Thanks. He was a good man. Taught me everything I know about cars and a lot about life." She smiled, though there was sadness in it. "He would have loved your Bugatti. Would have probably kept me there for hours going over every detail. He sounds like he was a great teacher, the best. He never treated me differently for being a girl, never suggested I should do something more appropriate, just handed me a wrench when I was 8 and said, 'Let's see what you can do.'" Marcus directed her to his building, a sleek glass structure overlooking the ocean. As she pulled up to the curb, he found himself reluctant to leave the conversation. "Listen," he said, "about that rain check on dinner. Are you free Saturday night?" Rory looked surprised. "Marcus, you don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to. I want to. You've helped me twice now, and honestly, I've enjoyed talking with you more than I've enjoyed talking to anyone in months." She studied him for a moment, and Marcus realized he was nervous waiting for her answer, an emotion he hadn't felt in years. "Okay," Rory said finally. "Saturday night, but somewhere casual, okay? I don't own anything fancy enough for the places you probably go to. How about that place on the pier you mentioned? Fish tacos and ocean views. Now you're speaking my language." Rory grinned. 7 o'clock? It's a date." Marcus got out of the truck, then leaned back in through the window. "And Rory, Thank you for everything. Just doing my job, Marcus. No, he said seriously. It's more than that. You made me think about things I've been avoiding thinking about for a long time. Rory's expression softened. Maybe that's what friends do. Marcus watched her drive away, standing on the curb long after the truck had disappeared into traffic. Friends. When was the last time he'd made an actual friend, someone who didn't want something from him, someone who just enjoyed his company? He walked into his building, nodding to the security guard, and took the elevator to the 20th floor, where TechCore's offices sprawled across half the building. His assistant, Margaret, looked up as he entered. Mr. Chen, you have messages from the investors group about next month's meeting, and Margaret, what meetings do I have on the weekend of Emma's birthday? She pulled up his calendar, her expression carefully neutral. The quarterly investors meeting, sir. It's been scheduled for 6 months. Move it, sir. Move it. Push it to the following weekend, or the one after. I don't care if it's inconvenient. My daughter's birthday is more important. Margaret's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a genuine smile. Yes, sir. I'll handle it immediately. Marcus walked into his office and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the Pacific Ocean stretching to the horizon. Somewhere out there, Rory was probably heading back to her shop, ready to dive back into the work she loved. He pulled out his phone and called Jennifer. Marcus? She sounded surprised. He couldn't remember the last time he'd called her during business hours. Hey, I just wanted to let you know, I'm coming to Emma's. A party. I'll be there. No excuses this time. There was a long pause. Marcus, if this is about the investors, it's not. Well, it is, but I've moved them. Emma's party is more important. Who are you? And what have you done with my ex-husband? Jennifer asked, but he could hear the smile in her voice. I'm working on it, Marcus said, and for the first time in a long time, he meant it. After he hung up, Marcus looked at the business card still in his wallet. Castellano Automotive, with that oil stain in the corner. Sometimes he thought the most valuable repairs aren't done on machines. Sometimes they're done on lives that have broken down without anyone noticing. Saturday evening arrived with that particular quality of golden light that only California seems to produce, the sun hanging low over the Pacific and painting everything in warm amber tones. Marcus arrived at the pier 15 minutes early, a rarity for him, and found himself uncharacteristically nervous. He'd worn jeans and a casual button-down, probably the most relaxed outfit he'd worn in public in years, and he still felt overdressed. The pier was bustling with the typical Saturday crowd, families with kids chasing each other around, tourists taking selfies, couples walking hand in hand, street performers entertaining small crowds. The smell of fried food and salt air filled the evening. Marcus walked past the fish taco place Rory had mentioned and found a bench with a view of both the restaurant and the parking lot, settling in to wait. He checked his phone. 3 emails from work that could wait. A text from Emma with a string of excited emojis about their upcoming birthday plans. He couldn't help but smile at that. And a message from Jennifer simply saying, "Thank you." 2 words that somehow carried the weight of years of disappointment finally being addressed. You look deep in thought. Marcus looked up to find Rory standing there, and for a moment he forgot to respond. She was wearing dark jeans and a green blouse that matched her eyes, her hair down instead of in its usual ponytail. She clearly made an effort, though she still managed to look effortlessly casual in a way Marcus envied. Just clearing my head, he said, standing up. You look great. You clean up pretty well yourself, Rory replied with a smile. Though I almost didn't recognize you without the $1,000 suit. Felt appropriate to match my surroundings. Come on, I'm starving. They got in line at the taco stand, a local institution that had been serving the same recipes for 30 years, according to the faded sign. The menu was simple: fish tacos, shrimp tacos, and not much else. Perfect. So this is where the magic happens, Marcus said, looking around at the decidedly unfancy establishment. Best fish tacos in LA, Rory assured him. I know it doesn't look like much. Hey, I started my company in a studio apartment that smelled like the Indian restaurant downstairs. I'm not one to judge based on appearances. They ordered. Rory got the fish tacos with extra lime. Marcus decided to trust her judgment and got the same, and found a spot at one of the picnic tables overlooking the beach. The sun was just beginning its descent toward the horizon, turning the sky into a canvas of oranges and purples. Your car's almost done, by the way, Rory said after they'd settled in. Found 3 more corroded grounds just like I suspected. Cleaned them all up, replaced the connectors. She should be good for a long time. I appreciate it, though I have to admit I'm a little disappointed. Disappointed? Rory looked genuinely concerned. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, it's just, once I pick up the car, I won't have an excuse to stop by your shop anymore. Rory's expression shifted from concern to something softer, more pleased. Marcus Chen, are you saying you'd miss me? Maybe, Marcus admitted, feeling more vulnerable than he had in any boardroom negotiation. Is that strange? Not strange. Sweet, actually. Their food arrived, and Rory immediately squeezed lime over her tacos with practiced ease. But for the record, you don't need an excuse. My shop has a door. It opens. You're welcome any time. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the sun sink lower. The tacos were, as promised, exceptional. Fresh fish, perfectly seasoned, simple and perfect. Can I ask you something? Marcus said eventually. That day on PCH, why did you really stop? You said you wanted to help, but there must have been dozens of other cars you could have stopped for. Rory considered her answer carefully. Honestly, the Bugatti caught my eye, of course, but it was more than that. You looked so, she searched for the word, lost. Like here's this guy with this incredible machine, and he's completely helpless. It reminded me of something my dad used to say. Sometimes the richest people are the poorest when it comes to actual skills. I figured you could use a hand. Ouch. That's pretty accurate, though. I didn't mean it as an insult, Rory said quickly. You have your skills. Building companies, managing people, all that stuff I'd be terrible at. We're just good at different things. I used to have more skills, Marcus found himself saying. When I was younger, starting out, I could code, troubleshoot systems, actually build things. Now I just manage, attend meetings, make decisions based on other people's information. Sometimes I feel like I've become useless at everything except showing up and signing things. That's not useless, though. Companies need leaders. But do they need leaders who've lost touch with why they started leading in the first place? Marcus set down his taco, his appetite suddenly gone. Sorry, I'm being a downer. This was supposed to be a fun dinner. Hey, Rory said, reaching across the table to touch his hand briefly. This is fun. Real conversation is fun, even when it gets heavy. You don't have to perform. For me, Marcus, I'm not an investor or an employee or your ex-wife. I'm just someone who fixes cars and apparently asks too many personal questions. Marcus laughed despite himself. You know what? I like that. I like that you're just you. No ulterior motives, no agenda. Well, full disclosure, I do have one agenda. What's that? Getting you to try the churros from that stand over there. They're life-changing. They walked along the pier after finishing their tacos, joining the flow of people enjoying the evening. Rory pointed out various spots, the arcade where she'd spent an embarrassing amount of quarters trying to win a stuffed animal, the spot where she'd first seen the Pacific Ocean after moving from Detroit, the bench where she sat sometimes when she needed to think. You really love it here, Marcus observed. I do. Detroit was home. But LA feels like possibility, you know, like anything could happen. She looked at him. Is that how you felt when you started your company? Yeah, exactly. Everything was possible. Every day was a new challenge to figure out. I'd work 20 hours straight and not even notice because I was so absorbed in building something. He shook his head. I miss that feeling. So, get it back. It's not that simple. Why not? Rory stopped walking, turning to face him. Serious question, Marcus. What's actually stopping you from making changes, from doing things differently? Fear, probably, Marcus admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. Fear that if I step back, the company will fail. Fear that if I change things, I'll lose what I've built. Fear that I've gone too far down this path to change direction now. That's a lot of fear, Rory said gently. You know what my dad told me when I said I wanted to move out here and start my own shop? He said, fear is just your imagination working against you. Make it work for you instead. I had no idea what that meant at the time, but I think I'm starting to figure it out. What does it mean? That the same imagination that creates worst-case scenarios can also create best-case ones. You're picturing everything that could go wrong if you make changes. But what could go right? They continued walking, Marcus turning the question over in his mind. What could go right? He could be more present for Emma. He could actually enjoy his work again. He could build something meaningful instead of just profitable. He could have actual friendships instead of business. Relationships. He could be the person he'd always meant to be, before success and stress and fear had reshaped him into someone he barely recognized. Your dad sounds like he was pretty wise, Marcus said. He was, though he'd be the first to tell you that wisdom comes from making a lot of mistakes first. Rory smiled at the memory. He once rebuilt an entire engine from scratch, spent 2 weeks on it, only to realize he'd installed the pistons backward, had to start over. He could have been furious, but instead he just laughed and said, well, now I know what not to do. I wish I could be that philosophical about my mistakes. It's not about being philosophical. It's about giving yourself permission to be human. Rory stopped at a churro stand, ordering 2. Here. Life-changing churros, as promised. Marcus took a bite and had to admit they were pretty incredible. Crispy outside, soft inside, covered in cinnamon and sugar. Okay, you were right about these. I'm right about a lot of things, Rory said with mock arrogance. It's my best and worst quality. They found a spot at the end of the pier, leaning against the railing and watching the last of the sunset fade into twilight. The lights of the pier began to glow brighter as darkness fell, and the temperature dropped enough that Marcus could feel Rory shiver slightly beside him. Without thinking about it, he shrugged off his jacket and offered it to her. Here, Marcus, I'm fine. Just take it. I'm warm enough. Rory accepted the jacket, pulling it around her shoulders. Such a gentleman. My mother would be proud. She drilled manners into me pretty thoroughly. Marcus paused, then added, she passed away 6 years ago. Cancer, like your dad. I'm sorry. Me too. She never got to see the company really take off. She believed in me when nobody else did, worked extra shifts to help pay for my first apartment, never doubted that I'd make something of myself. Marcus felt the familiar ache of her absence. Sometimes I wonder if she'd be proud of what I've become, or disappointed that I let success change me so much. From what you've told me about her, I think she'd be proud of you for asking that question, Rory said quietly. The fact that you're aware you've changed, that you want to do better, that's not nothing. They stood in silence for a while, the sound of waves and distant laughter filling the space between words. Marcus realized he felt more relaxed than he had in months, maybe years. There was no pressure to perform, no need to have all the answers, no judgment for admitting uncertainty or fear. Can I tell you something weird? Marcus asked. Weird is my specialty. When my car broke down last week, I thought it was the worst possible timing. I had meetings, calls, 1,000 things to do. But now, I'm kind of glad it happened. Rory looked at him, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Because you got to meet a charming mechanic with excellent taste in tacos. That's definitely part of it, Marcus agreed. But also because it made me stop, literally stop. I had to just sit there and wait, and in that waiting things became clear that I'd been avoiding seeing for a long time. Like what? Like the fact that I've been so busy running towards success that I forgot to notice I'm running away from everything that actually matters. My daughter, my own happiness, genuine connections with people. I've been optimizing my life for profit instead of meaning. Monday morning arrived with thick marine layer, the kind of grey that blankets Los Angeles and makes everyone slow down a bit. Marcus arrived at Castellano Automotive at 9, as Rory had suggested, to pick up his newly repaired Bugatti. He'd spent most of Sunday thinking about their conversation on the pier, about the changes he wanted to make and how to actually implement them. He'd made some calls, moved some meetings, had a long video chat with Emma where they planned her entire birthday party together. She wanted a pool party with her friends, nothing fancy, just fun. He'd agreed immediately, seeing the surprise and delight on her face when he'd said yes, without trying to optimize or improve her vision. The shop door was open, and Marcus could hear music playing inside, something classical, Vivaldi maybe. He found Rory underneath a silver Mercedes, visible only by her legs and the work light illuminating from below. "Morning," he called out. The creeper rolled out and Rory looked up with a smile. "Marcus, you're early. Habit. Successful people show up 15 minutes early to everything, or so I've been told. Successful people also apparently don't know how to sleep in." Rory stood, wiping her hands. She was back in her work clothes, hair in the familiar ponytail, completely in her element. "Your car's ready. Want to see what we did?" For the next 20 minutes, Rory walked him through every repair she'd made, showing him the before and after photos, explaining the technical details in a way that made sense, even to his non-mechanical brain. Marcus found himself genuinely fascinated, not just by the work itself, but by her obvious passion for it. "So basically, you rebuilt the entire electrical grounding system," he summarized. "Essentially, yes, she should be rock solid now, and I treated all the connection points to prevent future corrosion. You live near the coast, so that salt air is always going to be a factor, but this should buy you years of reliability." "What do I owe you?" Rory handed him an invoice. Marcus looked at the total and frowned. "This can't be right." "Why not?" "Because the dealership quoted me 3 times this much for the same work." "Well, I'm not the dealership, and I don't have their overhead costs." Rory crossed her arms. "It's a fair price for the work done, Marcus. I'm not going to overcharge you just because you can afford it." "I'm not saying you should overcharge me. I'm saying you're undercharging yourself. This is master-level work, Rory. You should be paid accordingly." "And I am," she insisted. "Look, I know you're used to paying premium prices for everything, but this is what the work costs. Quality doesn't have to mean expensive. It just means done right." Marcus realized he wasn't going to win this argument. "Fine, but I'm leaving you a very generous tip." "There's no tip line on an invoice." "Then I'll figure something else out." He pulled out his credit card, but Rory shook her. "Ed, check or cash, please. The credit card fees would eat into my margin." "You're killing me here," Marcus said. But he pulled out his checkbook, something he rarely used anymore, and wrote the check for double the invoiced amount. Rory looked at it and glared at him. "Marcus, it's my money. I can spend it how I want. Consider it a donation to supporting local businesses who do exceptional work and undervalue themselves." "You're impossible. I've been called worse." Marcus took the keys. She offered and walked over to his Bugatti. It looked exactly the same on the outside, but knowing everything that had been done to it, he felt different about it somehow. Less like a status symbol, more like a machine that had been properly cared for. He started the engine, and it roared to life with its characteristic smoothness. Everything felt perfect. "How does she sound?" Rory asked, coming over to listen with a professional ear. "Perfect. You did amazing work." "That's what I do." Rory leaned against the workbench, studying him. "So what now? Back to the high-powered executive life?" "Actually," Marcus said, turning off the engine and getting out, I was hoping to ask you something. Shoot. My daughter Emma's birthday party is this Saturday. Pool party, nothing fancy, but she loves cars. I think she gets that from my dad. And I mentioned I'd met this brilliant mechanic who had fixed my Bugatti. She wants to meet you. Rory looked surprised. You told your daughter about me? Yeah, I hope that's okay. She's at that age where she's figuring out what she wants to do with her life, and I think meeting someone like you, someone who's passionate about their work and really good at it, might be inspiring for her. Marcus, I don't know. A birthday party feels really personal, and we've only known each other for a week. I know, it's fast. But here's the thing. You've had more of a positive impact on my life in this past week than most people have had in years. You made me think about what matters. You reminded me who I used to be and who I want to be again. I'd like Emma to meet someone like that. Rory was quiet for a long moment, clearly torn. What if she doesn't like me? She will. How could she not? Marcus smiled. Look, no pressure. If you're not comfortable, I completely understand. But the invitation is genuine, and I think you two would get along great. Let me think about it, Rory asked. This is a lot. Of course, here. Marcus pulled out one of his business cards and wrote his personal cell number on the back. Text me either way. The party starts at 2 on Saturday. Address is on there. If you decide to come, great. If not, I totally understand. Thanks for understanding. Rory took the card. And Marcus? For what it's worth, I think Emma's lucky to have a dad who's trying so hard to be better. I'm the lucky one. She's been patient with me way longer than I deserve. Marcus drove away from the shop, the Bugatti running smoother than it ever had. And he realized he was already hoping Rory would come to the party, not for his sake, but because Emma deserved to meet people who were genuinely passionate about their work, who valued skill and dedication over status and appearance. The rest of the week passed in a blur of activity. Marcus restructured his meeting schedule, delegating more authority to his senior team and actually trusting them to handle things without his constant oversight. He blocked out time each day to actually work on technical problems again, diving into code for the first time in months. It felt rusty at first, like a muscle that hadn't been used in too long, but gradually the old pleasure came back. The satisfaction of solving puzzles, of building something with his own hands, even if those hands were typing rather than turning wrenches. He called his mum's old friend Rosa, who had catered family gatherings when he was growing up. Instead of hiring an expensive event company, he asked if she'd make her famous tamales and tacos for Emma's party. The food he'd grown up with, simple and delicious and full of memories. He video called Emma every night that week, something he hadn't done since the divorce. They talked about school, her friends, her worries about high school next year. Marcus found himself actually listening instead of half paying attention while working on something else. And in those conversations, he saw his daughter in a new light, not as a responsibility to manage, but as a person with her own dreams and fears and brilliant, quirky sense of humor. On Friday evening, Marcus got a text from an unknown number. It's Rory. I'd love to come to Emma's party if the invitation is still open. Should I bring anything? Marcus smiled at his phone and typed back, just yourself, and maybe your willingness to talk about cars with a teenager who's probably going to ask you a million questions. I can do that. See you tomorrow. Saturday arrived warm and sunny. The yester's marine layer burning off early to reveal perfect Southern California weather. Marcus's house in Pacific Palisades wasn't a mansion. He'd deliberately chosen something comfortable rather than ostentatious, but it had a great pool and a view of the canyon. By 1:30, he was starting to feel nervous in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Not about the party. Emma's friends were starting to arrive. Rosa's food smelled incredible. Everything was going smoothly. He was nervous about Rory coming, about what Emma would think of her, about whether this was too much too soon. Dad, you're pacing, Emma said, walking over with a knowing look. She'd grown so much in the past year, nearly as tall as him now, with his dark hair and her mother's sharp intelligence in her eyes. "I'm not pacing." "You're totally pacing. Who are you nervous about?" "Nobody. I'm just making sure everything's perfect for your party." Emma studied him with an expression that was far too perceptive for 14. "Is this about the mechanic lady you mentioned? The one you said was really cool?" Marcus should have known better than to try to hide anything from his daughter. "Her name is Rory, and yes, I invited her. I thought you might like to meet her. Because I like cars. Because you're figuring out what you want to do with your life, and she's someone who followed her passion even when it wasn't easy. I thought that might be interesting for you." Emma grinned. "Dad, are you trying to set me up with a mentor, or are you dating her?" "What? No, I mean we're friends, just friends. I've known her for a week, Emma." Okay, Emma said, laughing at his discomfort. "But you like her. She's a good person. She helped me realize some things about my life that I needed to see." "Then I'm excited to meet her," Emma said simply. "Anyone who can get you to actually take a week off from work and plan my entire birthday party with me must be pretty special." Before Marcus could respond, the doorbell rang. His heart did an embarrassing little jump, and Emma's grin widened. "I'll get it," she said, bouncing toward the door. Marcus followed more slowly, arriving just as Emma opened the door to reveal Rory, standing there in jeans and a nice blouse, holding a small wrapped present. "Hi," Rory said, looking slightly uncertain. "I'm Rory. You must be Emma." "That's me! Come in, come in!" Emma's enthusiasm was infectious, and Marcus saw Rory relax slightly. "Dad told me you fixed his stupid, expensive car. That must have been cool." "It was pretty interesting," Rory agreed, stepping inside. She handed Emma the present. "I wasn't sure what you'd like, but your dad mentioned you were into cars, so—" Emma tore open the wrapping paper. Patience had never been her strong suit, and pulled out a vintage metal sign that read, "Women Fixing Motors Since 1902, with a picture of early female mechanics. Her eyes went wide. "This is so cool. Where did you find this?" "Antique shop near my garage." "It reminded me that we've been doing this a lot longer than people think," Rory smiled. "Girls have always been good with tools. We just don't always get credit for it." Emma looked at the sign like it was treasure. "I'm going to hang this in my room. Thank you so much." "You're welcome. Happy birthday, Emma." Marcus watched the interaction with something warm spreading through his chest. Emma was already pulling Rory toward the backyard, asking questions about what it was like to work on exotic cars, whether she'd ever rebuilt an engine, what the coolest car she'd ever worked on was. The party was a success. Emma's friends splashed in the pool, Rosa's food was devoured with appropriate appreciation, and music played from outdoor speakers Marcus had set up. But what made it special was watching Emma and Rory talk. They sat on the edge of the pool, feet dangling in the water, deep in conversation about everything from cars to career paths to what it was like to be a woman in a male-dominated field. Jennifer arrived to drop off Emma's cake. They'd agreed to co-host this year, and Marcus introduced her to Rory. Jennifer's eyebrows rose slightly, that knowing look appearing that Marcus remembered from their marriage. "So you're the mechanic who's had such an influence on my ex-husband," Jennifer said, shaking Rory's hand. "I just fixed his car," Rory replied modestly. "She's being humble," Marcus interjected. "She basically rebuilt the entire electrical system." Jennifer looked between them, amused. "Well, thank you for whatever you did. He's been more present with Emma this week than he's been in years. That's worth more than any car repair." After Jennifer left, Marcus and Rory found themselves sitting in deck chairs, watching Emma and her friends play in the pool. "She's great," Rory said. "Smart, curious, not afraid to ask hard questions. You should be proud." "I am. Though most of the credit goes to Jennifer. She's the one who's been there consistently. But you're trying to change that now. That matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a while before Marcus spoke again. I've been thinking about what you said, about making changes, about getting back to what matters. And I think I need to make some bigger changes than I originally thought, not just adjusting my schedule or delegating more, actual structural changes to how I run the company and my life. Rory turned to look at him. Like what? Like maybe stepping back from CEO, transitioning to a more creative role where I can actually build things again instead of just managing, like setting real boundaries between work and life, like being honest with myself about what success actually means to me now versus what I thought it meant 10 years ago. That's a big decision, I know, and scary as hell. But staying on this path feels scarier somehow, like I'll wake up at 60 and realize I spent my whole life optimizing for the wrong things. Marcus looked at her. Is that crazy? No, Rory said firmly. That's brave. Most people never ask themselves these questions, let alone actually change course when they realize they're heading in the wrong direction. Will you help me figure it out? Not like professionally or anything, just as a friend who seems to have a clearer head about this stuff than I do. Rory smiled. I don't know if my head is all that clear, but yeah, I'd like that. Friends help each other figure stuff out. Friends, Marcus agreed, and the word felt more valuable than any business deal he'd ever closed. As the afternoon turned to evening and the party wound down, Marcus found himself feeling something he hadn't felt in years, genuine contentment. Not the fleeting pleasure of closing a big deal or the momentary satisfaction of hitting a revenue target, but deep down contentment with where he was and who he was with. Emma came over, wrapped in a towel, her friends having been picked up by their parents. Dad, this was the best birthday party ever. Yeah. Rory told me about how she learned to rebuild engines when she was my age. She said if I wanted, I could come by her shop sometime and she'd teach me basic car maintenance. Marcus looked at Rory, who shrugged. Only if it's okay with you. But I figure every person should know how to check their oil and change a tire. I think that's a great idea, Marcus said. Though fair warning, Emma, once you start learning from Rory, she sets high standards. Good, Emma said. I like high standards when they actually mean something. Out of the mouths of 14-year-olds, Marcus thought. His daughter understood something it had taken him 42 years to learn, that excellence means nothing if it's in service of the wrong goals. After Emma went inside to shower, Marcus walked Rory to her truck. The evening was cooling down, that perfect temperature where you could wear a t-shirt or a light jacket and be equally comfortable. Thank you for coming, Marcus said. It meant a lot to Emma and to me. Thanks for inviting me. I was nervous at first, but your daughter is amazing. She's got a good head on her shoulders. She gets that from her mother. Marcus paused. Though I'm hoping to contribute a bit more to her development going forward. I think you will. Rory opened her truck door, then turned back. Marcus, can I say something? Always. I think you're at the beginning of something really important. Not just changes to your schedule or your job, but really figuring out who you want to be. That's scary and hard, and you're going to doubt yourself a lot. But I want you to know that I believe you can do it. I've seen who you are under all the CEO stuff, and that person is worth fighting for. Marcus felt his throat tighten unexpectedly. When was the last time someone had said they believed in him, not in his company or his success, but in him as a person? Thank you, he managed. That means more than you. And no, friends, Rory reminded him with a smile. Friends, Marcus agreed. He watched her drive away, then walked back into his house where Emma was already hanging her new sign on her bedroom wall. Through the window, he could see the lights of Los Angeles spreading out below, millions of people living their lives, making their choices, figuring things out one day at a time. Marcus pulled out his laptop and opened a new document. At the top he typed, Transition Plan, from CEO to Chief Technology Officer. It was just a starting point, a first step on what would probably be a long and complicated journey. But as he began to type out ideas and possibilities, Marcus realized something profound. He wasn't running away from anything anymore. He was finally running towards something worth catching.